And we're going to start, though, this morning with politics and major news around the 2024 presidential race. Sources confirming to NBC News that President Biden will launch his re-election campaign next week.
3 sources familiar with the plans tell NBC News that announcement could come as early as Tuesday, April 25th, the anniversary of Biden's 2020 campaign announcement. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins us now with more on this.
Monica, good morning. So let's just jump in here because for months, Biden and his advisors have remained pretty vague about his intentions for 2024. But now it seems he's ready to make it official. Of course, he spoke to today's Al Roker not too long ago. What do we know about this re-election announcement?
Hi there, Zen Clay and Valerie. That's right. We knew for weeks now that President Biden and his top aides were closing in on the final decision of when to announce this re-election bid. So it wasn't so much a matter of if, but when. And yesterday, we were finally able to confirm with our sources that after returning from that trip in Ireland last week, the president did huddle with some of his closest aides and decided he was ready to essentially say go on launching that re-elect as early as next week. And this is a president who does like to look at dates and sort of the symbolism and sentimentality of anniversaries. And so if he does announce on Tuesday, it would be the 4-year anniversary of when he announced in 2019 he was going to run for 2020. Now, our sources tell us likely this is going to come in the form of a video announcement that gets tweeted out. And you won't see a traditional campaigning or anything like that from the president, because he still, of course, is going to be governing the country, and you'll see him out on the trail, so to speak, much, much later in the cycle. So we are expecting him to talk about why he wants to continue to run, and this was a theme that we saw in the Union even this year, where he said he wants to, quote, finish the job. And I think you can expect to see that as a clear theme of this next run for the White House to keep it.
Monica, one obvious thing that's different this year than from when he ran previously for the 2020 race, he is now the sitting president. And according to the latest CNBC All-America Economic Survey, Biden's approval rating fell by 2 percentage points to 39% compared with November. Is this a major concern for him as he prepares to launch this campaign?
The president is the first one who says he likes to ignore all the polls, but of course you can't totally ignore the political reality that his aides have been tracking heading into this. I think what you can expect a re-election campaign to talk about is they're going to try to focus on what they perceive as the accomplishments of the first couple of years in office, overseeing some of the worst of the coronavirus pandemic, coming to a much better place, implementing and signing, of course, some of that key legislation when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to manufacturing, the Inflation Reduction Act. I think they're going to point to all of those things. And I think they're also going to try to continue to draw this contrast. And they feel for some time in weighing this calculus of when they were going to announce, they said, well, if we wait a little bit longer, do we let then the Republican nomination fight drag out and we stay above it? That was one of the arguments they were considering. But again, they need to start raising their own money and building this out for now. And so this sort of tracks with what we've seen other incumbent presidents do in terms of timeline of when they're launching. And so we should expect this next week. But much like many things with Joe Biden, nothing is totally final and official until he actually does it.
Okay, we know all eyes will be on that announcement. Monica, thank you so much.
Thank you. And this morning, millions of Americans could be in line for another round of severe weather. In Oklahoma, officials confirmed that 3 people are dead after severe weather, including multiple tornadoes, moved through the state Wednesday night. Authorities say the damage, which includes downed trees and power lines, is widespread.
And strong storms also made their way through parts of Texas on Thursday. Nearly 5 inches of rain fell in some areas. The heavy rain brought in flash flooding, and even large hail was reported in several communities.
So let's take a closer look with our meteorologist, Angie Lassman. She's tracking the severe storms all around the country for us this morning. Good morning, Angie.
Morning, ladies. Yeah, we're actually going to see that severe threat diminish significantly compared to previous days, but it's not zero. So just be aware that we'll still have the heavy rain. We could see maybe some hail, maybe some gusty winds, but the tornado threat is really going to be low through the day today. We'll look ahead to the weekend, though, because that changes. Here's where we're currently sitting as far as the heavy rain goes, mainly focused from places like Indianapolis, stretching all the way down to Houston. You can see just how active all of that lightning is sitting offshore for places like Texas and Louisiana. That is the area really stretching in the same kind of vicinity where we're going to look for the potential for that flash flooding through the day today. We're talking impressive rainfall rates up to 1 inch per hour. So on already saturated grounds, it doesn't take a whole lot for that flash flood flooding to occur. And it does include places like Memphis, Jackson, Nashville, New Orleans, and Lake Charles. So just be aware of that if you're going to be out and about and on the roads through the day today. We're also going to see that rain eventually work into parts of the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. And we could pick up a good amount of rain in some areas that really do need it. We're looking at a really dry start to the year so far for places like New York. So we could see a half an inch to up to an inch, and even isolated amounts up to 2 inches just north of Boston. So we'll watch for that rain to impact us just in time for our weekend plans. Switching gears, talking about the severe weather. Like I said today, it's not all that impressive. 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts potentially. You can see when we deal with the green shading, it's really just general kind of thunderstorms with a couple of strong ones that could mix into there. So we'll still watch for the hail. It would be maybe up to an inch. And again, that tornado threat is significantly lower than it has been in previous days. As we transition into tomorrow, though, if you live in Savannah up to Norfolk, you're going to want to watch for the potential to see some of these stronger winds, potentially some of this damaging hail, and maybe even a brief tornado as we get into the afternoon hours and the evening hours of Saturday as that front works to the east. Now, a couple things, too. As the front works to the east, we're going to see temperatures quickly cool down, but not before they reach near record highs today, guys. 77 for Philly tomorrow before we get back to those 60s and more seasonal values.
What we expect in the spring, after
exactly.
All right, Angie Lassman, thank you.
The Supreme Court is expected to rule on the fate of abortion pills before midnight tonight. The court is deciding whether to uphold a decision from a Texas federal judge that would ban abortion pills nationwide.
Yeah, the Texas judge ruled the FDA did not properly regulate the pills, specifically questioning its safety for young girls and women. It's a question medical experts and previous health studies have disputed. The Supreme Court justices delayed the decision originally set to take place on Wednesday. Until the court makes a decision, the pills remain accessible across the country.
Let's bring in Rachel Reboucher for more on this. She is Dean and James Beasley Professor of Law at Temple University. Rachel, good morning. Just walk us through what we can expect to see today. Do you see the Supreme Court coming to a decision? And if so, would that go into effect immediately, or could they possibly delay all of this again?
They could delay again. They could say they need more time. I mean, really, the Supreme Court can do anything it wants. But I think that what we'll see today is the Supreme Court, and this is just my prediction, I've got no inside information, but we could see the Supreme Court stay the order of the Fifth Circuit, the Texas court, and basically keep the status quo in place. Because I think to do otherwise would really upend, so much practice around medication abortion. But we could see the Supreme Court say, we're going to consider this case on the merits. And in the meantime, the order goes into effect and the regulation of mifepristone, that first drug in a medication abortion, it changes.
And Rachel, whatever the ruling from the court may be, is this the end-all, be-all when it comes to the fate of abortion pills in the country? And the Biden administration does not exactly have constitutional power to override the court's decision, right, if they uphold the Texas ruling.
Yeah, the Biden administration would not override the court's decision, but the FDA, under the Biden administration, has its own powers to decide how to respond to the decision. Federal agencies have enforcement discretion. They have to decide, like all law enforcement, what actions are going to target. And like all agencies, the FDA could decide how it's going to respond to this particular order. And in fact, Congress has mandated that the FDA apply certain processes, that are constitutionally compliant, that are responsive to the rights of companies, distributors, manufacturers. So this is not going to be the last word in the conversation about medication abortion. The FDA is going to play a very powerful role in deciding what happens next to abortion pills.
We know several states are already stockpiling the pill. California has promised to protect abortion rights no matter what the Supreme Court decides. Do states have rights that supersede the Supreme Court? And can abortion pills be protected by the state?
They certainly can be protected by the states. What makes this issue so complicated is that the FDA regulates the distribution and manufacture of the pills, but states regulate the practice of medicine. So they tell providers what they can and can't do. Now, providers are also subject to restrictions that are put on drugs by the FDA. And this ruling, if this order goes into effect, it affects the FDA's role, but it doesn't affect how states can regulate providers themselves and how providers can, for instance, prescribe off-label. So we're going to see a lot of conflict between the states that seek to protect abortion access and courts like the District Court in Texas and the Fifth Circuit that are looking to restrict access to abortion pills.
All right. With all the insight, Rachel Reboucher, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And in Alabama, 3 more people are under arrest in connection to a deadly shooting at a Sweet 16 birthday party. Authorities say one of those suspects is 15 years old. In all, 6 people have been arrested in the case, each of them charged with 4 counts of reckless murder. 4 people were killed in that deadly shooting in Dadeville last weekend, including the brother of Alexis Dowdle, who was celebrating her birthday that night.
This morning, Alec Baldwin is no longer facing charges in the deadly Rust movie set shooting. Prosecutors in New Mexico yesterday announced that they dropped 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter against the actor for the 2021 death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins.
In a statement, the prosecutors said charges were dismissed because new facts have been revealed in the case, but added that, quote, this decision does not absolve Mr. Baldwin of criminal culpability and charges may be refiled. That news came on the same day filming resumed on the Rust movie, which is now taking place in Montana.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now to help us break this all down. Danny, good morning. So prosecutors haven't said what the new facts are that led them to drop these charges. They only said that they require additional investigation and forensic analysis. So what's going on here? What kind of evidence would they need to refile charges?
Probably the only thing more disappointing than the prosecutors in this case has been the prosecutor's PR person. Time after time, they've issued problematic statements, and here you go, here's another one. So they're saying essentially that, oh, we're going to drop it for now, but hey, we could always come back if we find more information and refile. But here's the thing. They've had all the information for over a year. They had exclusive possession of the evidence. They had access to everything they needed in order to make the critical decision to charge somebody with a crime, maybe the most important decision in a defendant's life. And now they're not so sure. So what are the new facts? And whatever those new facts are, why didn't they have them a year and a half ago? They had access to testing. Was it something with the firearm? Well, did you send it to a competent tester? Did you send it to the FBI? And what did the FBI tell you at that time? I suspect we're not going to get a clear answer. And I also suspect this promise that charges could be refiled, the magic word there is could. Yeah, they could be. We won't see them refiled.
I mean, Danny, it's important to point out that all charges pertaining to this Rust shooting have not been dropped when it comes to the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. Of course, she was Baldwin's co-defendant. What should we expect there, especially because she's expected to testify next month?
Yeah, that's a more viable case because, after all, the armorer had presumably the primary responsibility for ensuring that the firearm was safe or not a firearm. Although I put an asterisk there because guess who else had some responsibility for that? Presumably the first assistant director. And do you know what happened with him? Well, they gave him a deal. And that would have been line number 1 of the closing argument for the defense is here's the person with the primary responsibility. And the state gave him a deal. Why? Because their eyes were always on Alec Baldwin, on the superstar, on the celebrity trophy that they could put on their wall. So again, the state made itself another problem by giving a deal to somebody who probably likely had shared in the criminal responsibility, at least under the theory of the state that there even was criminal responsibility. Remember, in the Brandon Lee shooting from, a couple decades ago, this is the kind of thing that happens with a little bit of negligence at each stage of the process. No charges were filed in that case, and arguably no charges should ever have been filed in this case against anyone.
And we know the legal situation is not over for Baldwin yet. There's another lawsuit from Helena Hutchinson's family, her parents, and sister. What happened yesterday, could that have any impact on that part of it?
Not so much. Had it gone to trial, what civil attorneys typically do, including me, is if there's a pending criminal case, you sit back. In fact, you ask to stay all the civil proceedings so you can scoop up all the good information that is uncovered during the criminal trial, because the state has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. A civil case only needs to be proven to a preponderance of the evidence. So there's a strategic benefit to sitting back and waiting for a criminal prosecution. The civil lawyers in that case, while they may be disappointed that the criminal case was dropped, it's still full steam ahead. They have a lot of the information out there in the ether. They're going to be able to do discovery and move their case forward.
All right. Danny, thank you so much for the insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And turning now to Capitol Hill, where the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Dick Durbin, has invited Chief Justice John Roberts to testify in a hearing on Supreme Court ethics. The invitation comes after it was revealed earlier this month that Justice Clarence Thomas received undeclared gifts and luxury travel from a wealthy Republican donor. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now for more on this. Ali, good morning. So first, can you just walk us through what Senator Durbin's invitation says and why he wants Chief Justice Roberts to testify? How unprecedented is this?
Not very unprecedented. At least that's what Senator Durbin says in his letter to Chief Justice Roberts. Now, as of yesterday, our team asked Durbin if he had heard back from Roberts. So far, the answer is no. But to give you a little bit of a sense of why he wants to talk to him, you're right to bring in all of that context about what's going on with Justice Clarence Thomas and the allegations against him in the short term about receiving undeclared gifts from a high-ranking donor. But also, prior to that, we talked often about the things that his wife was doing, potentially working alongside key people within the January 6th people who were being investigated by the January 6th committee. And so Thomas has really been one of the focuses here just around judicial ethics broadly. Nevertheless, this is why Durbin says he wants to talk to the Chief Justice, saying that since the last time that the justice addressed ethical issues, there have been a steady stream of revelations regarding justices falling short of ethical standards expected of other federal judges and public servants generally, and that these problems were already apparent back in 2011, but the court's decade-long failure to address them has contributed to a crisis of public confidence, which Durbin says, as the status quo, is no longer tenable. All of this comes as the Senate is mulling whether or not to try to put more restrictions in place regarding ethics reform for the Supreme Court. Hearing from the Chief Justice might just be part and parcel to that.
Yeah, and Ali, I'm glad you read that statement from Durbin, right? Because it's a steady stream. These have been continuous questions around SCOTUS and ethics concerns. Yeah. With this case specifically, though, how likely is it that Chief Justice actually testifies? And if not, would the hearing still go ahead without him?
Look, it's unclear whether or not he'll testify. And as I mentioned, Durbin points out in his letter that this is not unprecedented in terms of an ask of a sitting justice. But I do feel that they'll go forward without him if they don't hear back from him, if he does ultimately decline this invitation. This is a hearing, I think, that in talking to senators in recent months, they are eager to have this conversation about judicial reform broadly. We've seen the court just take such a central focus in Washington and across the country, in large part because of the decision on Dobbs last summer. But since then, there has been just such an extreme conversation in Washington around the role of the courts, around whether or not things are tenable as they are. And from an ethics perspective, that's the central focus here.
And Ali, briefly here, what are Senate Republicans saying about this invitation? They seem a bit skeptical, right?
Yeah, they're skeptical. You look at people like Senator Ted Cruz, another member of the Judiciary Committee, saying in the halls of Congress yesterday that while he does think that ethics and standards are important here, he sees this as just a chance for Democrats to go after justices who they're not in line with politically. That's not what Democrats say, but of course Republicans going to use this as a way to try to make it political. And look, if this hearing were to go forward, I imagine that kind of posturing is exactly what we would see in the hearing room, not just in the halls of Congress.
You'll keep your eyes on it. Ali Vitale, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.